Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's professional development session on using rubrics in Canvas grading. I'm Dave Giberson. I'm an old instructional design coordinator from Online Learning Pathways who's retired and come back from northern Idaho to help out with these professional development sessions. It's great to see uh, those of you I've known for years, and great to meet new folks as well. Okay, so what's a rubric? uh, it's, as we see the textbook definition here, it's basically a roadmap to grading that can be presented in a number of ways. It consists of a series of criteria normally that you feel are important for a particular completion of a particular assignment or discussion topic or an essay question on a test or whatever, and an ability to indicate, it includes an ability to indicate how well a submission for an assignment meets the criteria that you have set. For instance, here's a sample rubric for a writing assignment from Cal State Fresno. I just pulled this off the internet rather than coming up with one myself. In this case, and rubrics are often presented in tabular form like this. In this case, the columns in the table represent the criteria, knowledge of conventions for the writing assignment, clarity and coherence, rhetorical choices. And within each criterion, we see in the rows, the horizontal rows represent levels of fulfillment of that criterion, from accomplished to beginning. Sometimes it goes all the way down to non existent, as we're very well aware. So, this is the sort of thing we're talking about, a roadmap to grading. Why bother? Well, first off, and above all, it allows you to grade consistently. Of course, in any sort of complex assignment, there are going to be shades of accomplishment in the submissions that you get from your students. Some will be better than others, and the decision on how much partial credit to allow, below perfect and above zero, is largely, in many cases, a subjective evaluation on your part. A rubric allows you to be as consistent from student to student as possible so that you apply the criteria evenly throughout the grading. As we all know, that's a challenge, particularly as you tire toward the end of the stack and things like that of submissions. So, above all, rubrics promote consistency in grading. They also speed it up tremendously. It takes a little while to create a rubric initially, but you more than get that time back if you have any number of assignments to grade. Once you have, first off, creating the rubric fixes in your mind exactly what you think each of the criteria that you've created are worth, and it solidifies the criteria in your mind. So that I always had a tendency to forget what I was looking for about halfway through. I'd have to go back and regrade some things to make sure that I was fair and consistent. The rubric eliminates that, or vastly reduces the chances of that. And then once you have the rubric, you find that particularly in Canvas, you can grade with much greater speed while maintaining accuracy and consistency than you could without the rubric. So generally, the time required to create the rubric will be more than paid back on the other end of the process as you complete the grading. You'll spend a lot less time on that grading on that assignment, including the amount of time required to create the rubric. And finally, if you decide, and it is the default in Canvas, to allow your students to see the rubric before they complete the assignment, you make your expectations for the assignment much clearer to them. And they're motivated to pay attention to that, of course, because this is how their grade is going to be determined. So not only is the student going to benefit in this way, but you're likely to get much better submissions, which, as we all know, are so much easier to grade. Isn't it easier to grade the good papers than the bad ones? So the rubric just has all sorts of, creating a rubric and using it has all sorts of advantages to you as well as to the students in the grading process. And rubrics in Canvas can be applied to homework assignments, graded discussions, and to quizzes. And we're going to go now and look and see how to do this in Canvas for all of these instances. So let me pull up a Canvas course here. I have a tutorial sandbox that I use for a variety of flex sessions, and I'm going to use that tonight for our discussion of rubrics. And I have a little module in here that I'm going to work from. And the first example we're going to look at is a Canvas assignment, a homework assignment, where a student has to do some writing and according to the instructions provided in the assignment. Indeed, let's look at the assignment. Okay, here's the instructions. Define the term screencasting, my favorite technique, instructional technique. Include 3 instructional applications of screencasting. What can you do with it? And list 2 software tools, whoops, forgot the plural there, that can be used to create screencasts. Upload your answers as a Word document to the assignment Dropbox. All right, we're not interested in the mechanics of the assignment here tonight so much as the results. Once I have created this assignment and set all of the various parameters for it that we're familiar with, this one has 10 points, is worth 10 points. It's to be, as the instructions suggest, it's to be accomplished by a file upload where the student creates a document file, in this case a Word document, offline on their own computer or their mobile device, and then uploads that file to the assignment Dropbox to fulfill the assignment. Okay. Back out of that. And once you create the assignment and save it, you go to the assignment information page as the instructor, as I am here, and scroll down to the bottom of the assignment. You see this button, Add Rubric. This is how we create a rubric for this assignment. Click Add Rubric. If perhaps we had created a rubric that would be suitable for this assignment previously, we can look and see if we have a rubric in this course that would be appropriate for this assignment. So I can click here, find a rubric, and well, maybe there is, maybe not. If I don't find one that I like, or if I want to create a new one, I have this rubric creation screen here, which looks a little odd at first, but once you see it fleshed out once, it's not too difficult. First thing we do with the rubric is name the rubric so that we can recognize it again as for what it's used. I'm just going to call it, I've got to call it something unique. Definition rubric for screencasting. I can call it Fred if I want to, as long as I remember what that means. Okay, so we're going to create a table here. And unlike that example rubric I showed you, our criteria are going to be the rows in the table, and our levels of attainment, so-called ratings by Canvas, are going to be the columns. But unlike that nice, neat rubric we saw in the example slide, Canvas allows you to have varying levels, varying numbers of ratings from criterion to criterion, as we're going to see here in a minute. The first thing we have to do is specify the first criterion. You get one row to start, and we're going to add more. We're going to add more criteria. We'll have 3 criteria in this rubric. But to start, I have to change where it says description of criterion to something meaningful. So I do that by clicking on the little pencil icon, which is sort of a universal edit symbol. And it allows me to change description of criterion, like your name, to, in this case, quality of definition. I can add a more detailed description if I like. I don't think that'll be necessary in this case. And then I just update criterion, so I have my first criterion labeled here, or specified. And now I've got ratings. And the default ratings are full credit or no credit. We can probably nuance that a little bit better. To edit the ratings, I use the edit symbols, the pencils, just like I did for the name of the criterion. And the first rating, I have to replace full marks with something a little more meaningful, like excellent definition. But I probably also need to be a bit more specific so that I remember what I was really looking for here. So I'll say fully correct and complete definition. And I can be as specific or as vague as I wish, depending on how easy this is. I want to make it later. And then I also need to specify the number of points that this is worth if the student gets satisfies this criterion completely. The question as a whole is worth 10 points, I said when I created the assignment. How much of that do I want to make the definition worth? These are things I have to ask myself before I create the rubric. Well, that's probably worth at least half of the total credit for the question. So I'm going to leave this. It came up by default as 5, but that's just Canvas's go-to value. It's placeholder value. But it so happens that 5 is what I want in this case. So I'm going to leave that at 5. So if a student nails the definition, they get 5 out of the 10 points just for that action, just for that criterion. And then I update the rating. So the student's going to get 5 points for a perfect score. But we know they won't all be perfect. But many of them will be not so imperfect that they deserve no credit. So I'm going to add, excuse me, I'm going to add an intermediate rating here, and that's what this blue circle with white cross in it will allow me to do. This is a secondary. It's an intermediate rating, an intermediate level of fulfillment of the criterion. And Canvas has just guessed at 3 points. I'm going to say 2.5. And we'll call this, let's see, the one before was excellent definition. We'll call this one good definition. Get both those in there. And this one might be partially correct definition. With some omissions. Can't seem to type that tonight. There we go. And this will be worth 2.5. So this allows me to give an intermediate. And I can have as many intermediate ratings as I like. I could be much more granular, but in the interest of time here, I'm not going to belabor that point. And then the third one, no marks. I could keep adding ratings here, but I'm going to stop at that point. I'm going to edit this one, and I'm going to say unacceptable. Unacceptable.
Shout out to Mary Jackson, her generosity and passion.
I'm sorry, I don't know what happened there.
Aerospace engineer, job was segregated. She wasn't intimidated. Worked her way up to the most senior title. It was clear that her research.
Alexa, stop. That was my Amazon Echo. I have no idea what prompted that. Okay, let's go back. All right. An acceptable definition. And that'll be 0 points. So now I have my first criterion built out with 3 levels of accomplishment for that criterion. More if I wanted. But those are not the definition is not the only thing I asked for. I also asked for 3 instructional applications of the technique of screencasting. So I can add a row in the rubric, another criterion, by just clicking this button here, or this link labeled Add Criterion, or Plus Criterion. And this will be a new criterion, as opposed to duplicating a previous one, which would, if it were appropriate to do so, I could speed up the process of creating the rubric. If I had several criteria that had the same ratings, like excellent, good, unacceptable, boom, 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 excellent, good, unacceptable, and so on, one after another. If the next criterion were going to be just like this one, I could duplicate it and edit it and save myself some time. But in this case, that what I have in mind here, it won't be appropriate. So I'm going to go to New Criterion, and I have to add a description. And we'll call this Instructional Applications. And there's probably no need for a longer description, but I could add it if I wanted to. And now I have the same two default ratings or levels of accomplishment that I had before. And I have to decide, the first rating is the one that the student would get if they were perfect. And I have to decide now how many points that would be worth. The total, again, the total value of the assignment is 10 points. And I have 5 points left after the definition was given 5 points. In this case, the obvious answer would be 3. And it makes it very easy. I can just count the number of instructional applications they give me, correct instructional applications that they give me, and very quickly assign partial credit for this criterion, or assign credit for this criterion. Instead of full marks, we'll call this excellent. And the rating description will be something like 3 correct applications. And update. And you see this coming? How many points would the next level of accomplishment be worth? If the perfection is 3, the next step will be 2. This would be good. And the rating description would be 2 correct applications. Now, I only had 3 ratings on the first criterion. Am I limited to 3 here? No. The number of ratings, the number of levels of accomplishment for each criterion are independent of the other criteria. So I'm going to add, obviously enough, a third rating here, which would be worth 1 point, and shall we say acceptable? Well, that's not entirely accurate. Poor, about that. 1 correct application. And then, of course, there's the possibility the student didn't answer at all or didn't include any applications. We'll call that would award them no points for this criterion. We'll call this unacceptable. And this would be no correct applications. So in this criterion, I have 4 ratings. Canvas doesn't care. This doesn't have to be a neat table. It just has to make sense to you. And so far, I've accounted for 8 out of the 10 8 out of the 10 points that the assignment is worth up here. So I have I need one more criterion, and given that they were also asked to list 2 software tools that can be used to create screencasts, that's the obvious third criterion. I'll add another criterion. I will make this a new criterion since it's really not identical to either of the other 2, or nearly identical. And we'll call this creation tools. Again, whatever makes sense to you. And we'll, that's probably enough for that. And in this case, I'm going to have, no surprise, 3 ratings again, 3 levels of accomplishment. They're going to be, the student gave 2 correct tools, 1 correct tool, or no correct tools. So I can very quickly put that in, just as we did before. And I only have 2 points left, so the full credit is going to be 2 points. I'll call this excellent. Rating description. 2 valid tools. And then we'll have a secondary one that will be worth 1 point, which would be one valid tool. I'm sorry, that will be fair, hold on. And the rating description will be 1 valid tool. And the last one, if I edit that, worth no points would be unacceptable. And the description would be no valid tools. So, there's my rubric. I have 3 criteria. First criterion constitutes 5 out of the 10 points available for each submission. The second is 3, and the third is 2, so I have a total of 10 points. Obviously, this value here has to match this value here if it's going to mean anything. So, I have some options here that I can select. You can remove points from the rubric if you're evaluating competence as opposed to assigning numeric values. That sort of almost seems to defeat the purpose of the rubric to me. We don't use the Learning Mastery Gradebook. That's immaterial. Certainly, I'm going to use this rubric for assignment grading. That's the whole point. It can simply be used as a presentation to the student of your expectations without it being used for grading, but that seems to be pointless to me. So we'll make sure that use this rubric for assignment grading is checked, and then we will remember to create the rubric, because if we don't, it's going to throw away all of our work.
Anh thứ sáu tuần tới.
Pardon?
Chưa.
Oops.
Cùng mấy ông Lê Trọng Lộc.
A little background noise there. I'm going to mute everyone, but you can unmute yourselves to ask a question at any time. Please do so if you have them. So we'll create the rubric, and there it is. It is now stored in the course. It'll be used for this assignment, but you might find another. This rubric is pretty specific to this assignment, so it's unlikely this one would be reusable, but sometimes they are. So let's see how it works from your standpoint and from the standpoint of the student. Well, let's do the student first. Go to modules, and I'll go to a student view, so I'm acting as my test student. And I'll go to this define screencasting assignment in the first module. When the student accesses the assignment, they see the instructions, the information about the assignment that they're going to need, like the due date, and how they're going to submit it and all that. And they can see all this before they try to submit the assignment. But they also see the rubric. So they have a very detailed understanding of exactly what you're looking for and what the consequences of ignoring that are. So the students get to see the rubric. It's a very useful instructional tool, as well as one that makes you a more consistent and a more rapid grader. And once the student has read the instructions, of course, they'd go and they'd create this document and come back and make a new attempt. This student has apparently submitted this assignment already. So, and I've given more than one try, more than one attempt. So the student would come back after seeing the rubric and try again in this case. So that's what it looks like to the students. Let's see what it looks like to you in your grading. We'll go to the gradebook, the usual way. And I've got a bunch of assignments in this, so I'm going to use a new feature in the gradebook, which allows me to search for assignments by title. And there's the define screencasting assignment. I don't have to keep going back and forth in the gradebook looking for that column. There it is. And I appear to have 3 submissions for that assignment right now. They appear to have been turned in late. That was because the due date on this was set earlier. I've used this assignment before, so I can act or not on that as I prefer. But let's take a look at the student 2's submission in the usual way by clicking on the submission icon, clicking the right arrow that pops up next to it when I do that, and going to the speed grader. All right, here's the student's assignment, or assignment submission. And here is a button that allows me to view my rubric, if I have one. I can see the rubric, and I can scroll back and forth. If I want to see the entire rubric at one time and it's not too wide, it doesn't have too many ratings, I can mouse over this little icon right here in this gray bar that separates this feedback box here, grading box, from the assessment or from the assignment submission, and I can click and drag this back and forth so I can see the entire rubric. Of course, if I do that, my submission gets kind of small, but I can go back and forth with that at will. Okay, so screencast, Okay, this is a good definition. So I go back to my rubric, and I see that it's an excellent definition. And note that when I mouse over the ratings, they light up. So if I decide that this is an excellent definition, rather than having to type in a number or something, I just click on that. It selects that rating for that criterion, and here's my points awarded for that criterion. So I just lowered my cognitive load. How many points was I kind of generate for that? What were my levels of partial credit, things like that? All that's embodied in the rubric. So I just click on the right box in the rubric and bang, that criterion's graded. Now, the next criterion was instructional applications. Well, this student appears to have not included any instructional applications in their answer, so that one's easy too. 0 points for that. Nor have they listed any tools that can be used to create screencasts, so bada bing. So this student gets 5 out of 10. And and in almost no time, I can click, click, click and be done grading this because I've done all the skull sweat, all the cognitive work before I got this submission by creating the rubric. I can, of course, I will, of course, want to make sure that that is saved, and that loads the grade that as determined by the rubric into the grade box here, so that will appear in the grade book. And the level of the rating for each criterion that the student earned is saved. And the student will be able to see this when they go back and review their grades in their grades tool. So this gives them automatic feedback. They see why they got the grade that they got right there. I do, of course, have more options to provide feedback to them. I can type in comments, I can record a video for them, I can attach a file with more extensive comments, all the usual stuff we have in the speed grader, but the rubric gives them some feedback more or less automatically. When I'm done with that, I just submit and that grade and go back to the grade book and that grade, and we'll define screencasting again, and that grade is automatically stored. And then I can just keep going very quickly to the next student and the next student, the next submission and the next submission, and so on. And that rubric will vastly speed up the process. So that's how rubrics are created and used with homework assignments. They're not, indeed, most of the time when you use a rubric, you'll probably use it with a homework assignment. That's a much more common application of rubrics, because homework assignments tend to be more complex to grade than, say, graded discussions or quizzes, many of which are graded automatically by the system. Objective questions and tests are graded automatically by the system. But we can use rubrics with discussions and quizzes where appropriate. Let's see how to do that. We'll go back to the modules here. And I have an essay assignment here. And I don't have a rubric for it yet, as indicated by this. If I decide to add a rubric, I could create one from scratch, as I just did with the definition rubric. Or I could, again, look and see if I can find a rubric. And within, let's see, this is my tutorial sandbox. I'll go back there. Well, look at that. I have an essay rubric that I've created. And I can look at that. I can expand it a little bit if I can't see it well enough. If that looks like it might be useful, I can say use this rubric and not have to create another one from scratch. And here's the rubric. I didn't go to a lot of trouble on creating this rubric, but completeness, my two criteria are completeness of thought and grammar, and I've got ratings for each for a total of 10 points. Oops, pardon me. I made a mistake when I set this one up. That was supposed to be 10 points. Okay, so now the rubric and the point values are congruent, and I now have a rubric for my essay assignment. So if you make your rubrics generic enough so that they're applicable to more than one type of assignment or whatever, or more than one assignment, you can very easily reuse them in that way. Here I've got a graded discussion. Let's see what that looks like. Type one sentence that tells something about you you're willing to share. After you do this, reply to one of your peers with a comment. One thing you'll note here very quickly is that there's no add rubric button like there is on an assignment screen. Well, for some unknown reason, Canvas hides it. It's up here in this unmarked menu in the upper right. Anytime you see an unmarked menu on a page in Canvas, it's often interesting, if not useful, to click on that and see if there's anything useful in there. And there is a Show Rubric button. It's not entirely obvious that if you click on that, you'll be able to see if there's a rubric associated with this discussion. And apparently I have done that. If there were not one, it would have given me the option to add one. So I have three. In this discussion, the student was asked to post themselves, tell something about themselves, and then reply to a fellow student. And so those are the first two criteria. Did they do that? And did they do it very well, good, or unacceptably in each case? And also I've included a criterion for mechanics, like did they use proper grammar, spelling? Were they perfect at that? Were they just okay at that? Or were they a disaster at that? Were my three ratings there. So I can apply rubrics to discussions as well. And let's take a look at how that might be applied. If I go to grades here and look for icebreaker, there it is. Apparently I have two. Here's the icebreaker submissions. And I hate to pick on a real person here. This is just, we were just playing with this discussion at some point, learning about discussion tools in here, but let me just pick on John for no apparent reason and see. In the usual way, I'll go to the speed grader. I see that John has posted, but hasn't exactly replied. So let's go back to Judy on that one. As I say, we were just playing here. Okay, Judy was really getting into this. So, okay, my astrological sign is Aries. All right, I'll take that. And in a second post, need to visit Minnesota. My age, the only reason I can think of to visit Minnesota is to go to the Mayo Clinic, but well, and then some replies. This looks great. I can view the rubric as before, and I can say, this wasn't exactly a complete sentence, so I'm going to give her a good on the quality of post. The quality of the reply was excellent. She did several replies. I'll give her an excellent on that. And a complete sentence, well thought out. And the mechanics, We'll do good on that. Lots of abbreviations and ampersands and things like that. Save that. That gives Judy very quickly a grade of 7 out of 10. So this again vastly speeds up the grading process, provides Judy with feedback, and ensures that I treat everyone else the same way, or more or less the same way. So, discussion rubrics. Let's go back, and finally we're coming down to the wire here. Time for questions. We can also go back to the module. I've got a quiz in there. And about the only reason I can think of, though I'm sure other people have come up with reasons to use rubrics with tests, but the best reason I can think of is for an essay question. If you've got essay questions in your tests, you might like to have a rubric that would a generic rubric that would apply to any and all essay questions within that test, that would keep you have all the usual benefits. But an especially useful thing that you can do with screen, let me see. This is, first off, are you in speaker view? You want to be that. And maybe I can blow this up a little bit more for you here. Make it a little larger. Is that better?
Hi, Dave. It's Lena.
Hi,
Yeah,
Lena.
it seems like for some reason it looks very blurry, and it's not I have my glasses on. I just when you blow it up, it looks fuzzy
I don't know. I'm
on my
not.
computer.
Is
I don't
anyone
know if
else having
anyone.
that? Is anyone else having that problem? I'm not sure.
No.
No.
It's a little blurry. Yeah, I expect it to be a little blurry, but you should be able to discern it. This technique does, depending on your bandwidth and so on, can lower the quality of the screen a little bit. That's why I have this blown up to start with a bit, but perhaps I didn't quite have it blown up far enough. Is that better, Lena?
A little better. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
You bet. All right. Another, but a particularly useful thing you can do with quizzes and essay questions is a timed writing assignment, something that we're used to doing, and particularly English instructors will do from time to time, but it can happen in any subject area, where the students are asked to write something in class within a limited time in order to demonstrate their facility with a particular writing format and with various mechanics of writing. But there are not a lot of good ways to do that online except this one, which is to create a quiz which contains one or more essay questions, a quiz that has, if we edit it, a time limit, so that the student cannot take more time in creating the writing assignment than is necessary, or than is allowed, I should say. And the student, when they open the quiz, will be presented with a text box, a rich content editor box, wherein they can type their writing assignment, their submission for the writing assignment. And in this one, I have said the question is an essay question. In 200-300 words, discuss the utility of screencasting as an instructional tool. Okay. Again, I'm going to cancel out of that edit. Again, there's no add rubric button here, just as there wasn't for the discussion. But there is this unmarked menu up here in the upper right, just as we had with the discussion. If we click on that, there's a show rubric option in there. Son of a gun, they hit it. Click that, and Canvas says, what do you mean show rubric? There's no rubric associated with this quiz. If I click add rubric, now I can remedy that. And I can either create a rubric from scratch, as we did with the definition assignment a few minutes ago, or I can go to find a rubric. I can look for the course in which that rubric is located, and that essay rubric that we used before with the essay assignment would probably work here as well. So I'll select that and click use this rubric, and that rubric is now associated with that writing assignment. And when the though you don't see any indication of that here, but when you go to grade that essay question in the speed grader, that rubric will be available, just as we saw with the discussions and with the homework assignment. So that's the process of creating a rubric in Canvas. We've seen that. We've seen the process of selecting a rubric for use that you've already created, and we've seen it. We see that we can apply rubrics to homework assignments, to graded discussions, and in appropriate cases to quizzes. There'd be no particular reason to apply a rubric to a fully objective test where all the questions were multiple choice, matching, true, false, things like that. I mean, those are graded automatically. There's no evaluation process. There's no partial credit except that automatically applied by the system. So you don't need a rubric in that case. But if you have one or more essay questions in the test, and you can create a rubric that is generic enough to apply to all of your essay questions, then by all means you can attach a rubric to that quiz and utilize it in the process of grading those essay questions.
I have a question, Dave.
Good.
When you're using a rubric for an assignment, let's say that you want to, for consistency, you would like to keep the rubric open and just grade the one criteria and keep going down the students for that one criteria.
Oh, that's an interesting idea.
Is
You
that
could do that by just, let's see, or would it allow you to do that? I'm trying to think. If you save the rubric in each case,
yeah, saving?
no, I'm not.
That's
I'm not sure it would. I'm afraid it would throw away what you'd done up to that point. You'd have to redo it.
yeah, yeah.
Came back to it. That's an interesting idea. I don't think, and I'm not absolutely certain, but I don't think that would work in this case. I think
I
you're going
haven't
to have
found the
to
way. I
work
thought
your
you
way
would.
all the way through the rubric and save the entries in the rubric, and then before going on to the next student.
Yeah, you can certainly save it and leave the others alone, but you know, it's a lot of work as opposed to keep because when you save it, it closes the rubric.
Right,
And then
exactly.
yeah.
I don't
Okay.
think you can get it back.
Okay, that's
I
all
could
right.
be wrong. I'll check that. That's an interesting idea, and I can see the value in doing what you're saying, so that you're hyper consistent. You're dealing with one criterion at a time, so you don't have to keep all the criteria in mind at the same time. I'll try that and see. Interesting idea.
But thank you very much. It was great.
Cool. Well, Taya, rubrics take a little getting used to. What I might suggest is trying a dummy assignment. You should forgive the That would be an assignment which is not going to be used as opposed to an assignment assigned to a dummy. And use your test student as a test case, and just verify that it's working the way you think it is before you turn it loose on your students.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And I like that you can save them and reuse the rubrics over
Reuse them.
time.
Yeah. And you could go back and edit them as well if you decide.
Yeah.
Well,
neat.
that seemed like a good idea at the time, but perhaps I need another rating in here, something like that. You can go back
Right.
as long as students have not started submitting. That wouldn't be fair.
Right.
You have to have, once you turn it loose on the students, it pretty much has to stay that way. But in your evaluation process, you can, if you don't like the result first time you try it with your test student, you can go back and edit it and get it right before you apply that to an actual assignment.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And it was nice meeting you guys. I got to hop off. We have dinner on the stove. So,
It's 7 o'clock. Bye-bye.
Thank you
but
very
thank
much.
you so much. That was
Thanks
really
for coming.
interesting.
Thanks
Yeah,
so
of course. I learned a lot.
Anybody else have anything?
Hi, Dave, it's Lena.
Hey, Lino.
Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
I've noticed that we're not having too many seminars lately. We've been kind of limited.
I have been out of town. Just got back from a 9-day trip. I
see.
I left myself a window there so that we were traveling long days and it would have been difficult to do a session, and we were traveling each day. So I try to do about 8 or 9 of these in a semester.
Uh-huh.
So I've got 2 more, this one and 1 more tomorrow to finish up.
Oh, yes. I'll try to check out tomorrow too.
The May schedule is just about to come out.
Uh-huh.
We will announce that next Monday, or the first week of May, next Monday.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll be having some, obviously, the semester will be ending partway through.
Uh-huh. Yes.
So we'll load those into the beginning week or 2 of May, and they'll focus on ending up the semester.
Oh, okay. That's good. Thank you. I learned so much today. I
Well,
was like the other teacher. I was like, I'm nervous about the rubrics, but I got to learn a little bit more in detail today. Actually, a lot more for doing them in the future.
Yeah, until you see one built step by step,
Uh-huh.
it's really kind of opaque.
Yes.
I tried to pick a question or an assignment with a very easily rubriced
Uh-huh.
set of criteria, and obviously they're not always so easily. It's not always so easy to create the criteria
Yeah.
and the ratings.
Yeah, the ratings are the hard part in coming
Exactly.
up with that.
And those, but if you make a rubric, you only have to go through that process of uncertainty once.
Uh-huh. That's
You have
true.
it in your mind. The students will know exactly what you want, and then when you go to grade, it'll be very clear exactly what you intended when you created the assignment.
Yes.
Which, as we well know, can fade with time for us.
Uh-huh.
What was I going at? What did I think was important? The rubric fixes that in our minds as well as
Mm-hmm. It's true. And yeah, because it just helps a lot. And I like how you said it, they highlight, because I don't really have too many rubrics right now because I was just learning, but I like how they highlight, and then it will be easier to get the numbers in there.
And if you get a question from a student, why did I get the grade that I got? Well, you can go back and pull up that rubric and show them. This you got so much for this one, so much for this bit, and so much for that bit, and so on. So it eliminates a lot of discussions.
Thank you for that. And I also wanted to ask you, Dave. So now they're like pushing, like they don't want us to, like our department doesn't want us to have the students buy books anymore. I was wondering if you're gonna do a seminar on how to, because he was like trying to show us
open educational resources.
how to put it in the Canvas. He did it really fast on Friday, and he was trying to help us, but he didn't,
Oh,
it
interesting.
wasn't very clear the way he was explaining it.
They were showing you how to utilize open textbook.
Yes, he wants us to do that now. They don't want students to be buying hard
How can you
expensive
add
books.
that? How can you add that to
Yes.
the Canvas course?
Uh-huh.
Oh, thank you for that idea.
I was wondering we're gonna do that because
Yeah,
I'm getting a little bit nervous about that.
well, yeah, I'm always looking for requests, so I'll put
Uh-huh.
that in May.
Yes, he wants us to, and he was trying to show us, but I guess he's new at it too because he's all of us are new at online teaching and Canvas, but it was kind of hard. Mhm.
I'm guessing it was probably, well, of course, it'll vary a little bit depending on the provider, but
Mhm.
I know the California community colleges tend to use a lot of open stacks
Mhm.
textbook. Was this one of those?
Well, if you don't, I could look at it really fast. He gave us like a website to go in there. This is for
Oh, okay.
Spanish.
Let me let you, can you share your screen?
Uh, um, I can put it on the chat right now because I
Oh,
don't
that'd be
really
great.
know how to
That'd be
do
great.
that. This share screen on the spot to tell you. I don't know, but I can
No,
write it
that's no
down.
problem. But yeah, if you can put it on the screen, maybe I'll recognize it. If you put it
I see it.
in
I
the
see it
chat,
right
I'm
here.
sorry, maybe I'll recognize it.
Yeah, I have it right here. I'll
Great.
just type it really fast. It's called Press Books.
Press books. Oh, okay.
Yes.
No, yeah, that's another um,
Press
type of
Books
open textbook.
directory. Re book. I think I think it's that Pressbooks directory.
Okay. Yeah, I'm familiar with press books as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so how to get that into your course and just
Habits, yes.
put it in your course. I
Uh-huh.
will. Yeah, I've made a note of that here, and I will see if I can work that into the first 2 weeks in May.
That would be great, Dave.
Okay.
I don't know how our teaching modality is gonna be like, but I know they're definitely stressing for
Yeah, the
no books.
what is
Uh-huh.
it, zero cost textbooks,
Mm-hmm.
or zero textbook cost, I guess.
Yes,
You see,
something like
yeah,
that.
yeah, it's a movement that's been around for quite some time, but there
Oh,
does seem
really?
to be an accelerating pressure to adopt it, even though that's a little risky when you start messing with an instructor's choice of textbook. That's
Yeah.
something we've always been very careful to stay away from.
Mm-hmm.
There are
Mm-hmm.
some options, but we're
Mm-hmm.
not the ones deciding what textbook you need to use.
Yeah.
Um,
We have an online textbook right now, and I love it so much. We have everything, our exams, our
right. But it's
quizzes,
something the
everything.
students have to pay to access, I guess.
Yes, and I mean, it's not the price of it because I have a full class. I have like 28 students and they are all bought the book.
Oh
So
wow!
it's not like they're taking the
And very
class.
often the online versions are a lot less expensive.
Yeah, it's $200, but it's 3 semesters.
Oh, well, that's not something I'd classify as less expensive, I guess. But
Mhm.
yeah, there are lots of good textbooks, free open textbooks out there, and we do have some resources that will help you um, access those. But yeah,
Mhm.
certainly, hopefully there'll
Mhm.
be some good support on how to actually get that,
Yes.
make that available to your students. Okay, well, I will look
Thank
into
you. Thank you. I don't want to hold you on. It's probably
Oh,
super
not at
late
all.
over
No
there.
problem. That's a fascinating suggestion, and I'll see if I can work that in. If not in the first 2 weeks in May, then early in June.
Thank you. And
Okay.
I'll probably see you tomorrow for the other seminar.
Screencasting, okay?
Screencasting. Take care and have a nice rest of your
Thanks so much for
evening.
coming.
Thank you, Dave. Bye-bye. God
Bye bye.
bless. Mhm.